Mr. Bates.
Hey Kyle, I have the junior mister here. He thought he'd listen in too.
Wonderful. Awesome. Hello, junior mister.
Hello. It's Benjamin. Here, you slide over a little bit further.
Jordan, welcome.
Kyle, it's good to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you too.
Thanks for, I'm glad we can finally do this.
It's a fun time, and at least on my screen above you is Mr. David Bates. He was one of our conversations. Was it last semester even?
It was right before the winter break.
Okay. Wonderful.
Awesome. Where are you, David?
I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Okay, cool.
And
Great.
you?
I'm in Tampa.
Tampa.
Beautiful. This is like Chamber of Commerce weather today. It's like 72 degrees, no humidity. It's perfect.
It's Chamber of Commerce weather in Cedarville too, right, Kyle?
Nice.
Yeah, maybe the best we can hope for now, but
I do not miss the walk from Brock.
it still gets a little windy across Cedar Lake, that's for sure.
Well, now you got all those buildings around there that weren't there before. So back in the day, right, we just got froze out going across the lake.
I think the wind just changed the direction it was coming from. That's
Channels now in between the buildings.
it can be pretty brutal between here and the student union, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
You guys are, what part of Ohio are you guys in?
It's Dayton, essentially.
Okay, yeah.
It's considered South Central Ohio. We always talk about if you made a triangle between Cincinnati, Columbus, and Dayton, you'd find Cedarville kind of roughly in the middle.
Got it. I'm supposed to be up there. I'm supposed to be in Cincinnati for an event this fall. We'll see if it actually happens. See if the event's actually on. But you never know these days.
Outlook looks good for Ohio.
Yeah. It does.
We're trending towards getting back to normal. Yeah.
So is Florida, shockingly. God's grace.
Well, we have over 100 people registered for this afternoon.
Oh, awesome! This will be fun then.
And so again, some students registered just to get the recording. So I don't know how many are actually going to show up.
Yeah.
But it's conversational style.
Great.
Kind of / interview / somewhat round table, I guess, depending on who wants to just chime in.
Great.
And we just kind of free form our conversation, and probably going to give maybe another minute to see who else shows up, and then we'll just jump into it.
Sounds good. Yeah, it sounds great. I like conversational. I tell my team that works on the podcast, we know we're doing our job well if it feels like a conversation where me and my guests are having over coffee. It should never feel like an interview. It's hard. It's actually very hard to do when you only have audio and you don't have video. It's a challenge, but it's fun.
Yeah, a lot of the students, well, at least at the 6 and 7 p.m. hour, will just put their buds in and they'll listen while they're eating or while they're studying. Not a lot of interaction, maybe 5, 6, 7 students. But we're trying. We definitely want to make it more of a conversation. And of course, the more you make it a conversation, the faster that hour goes.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another installment of Conversations on Innovation at Cedarville University, sponsored by the Beyond program. As most of you know, Beyond is an ecosystem that targets innovation and entrepreneurship through the 15-credit academic minor, the Student Startup Accelerator, the Business Accelerator, the Angel Investor Network, and more. Please visit beyondcedarville.com for more information, and I will drop that link into our chat shortly. My name is Kyle Peterson, the Deputy Director of Entrepreneurship here on campus, and today I'm happy to have another esteemed guest for today's broadcast. I was first exposed to Mr. Jordan Raynor when his book Called to Create became required reading for one of my MBA courses, And chapter 11, the purpose of profit, was actually my favorite section. And I'm now happy to be reading his latest book, Master of One. Jordan, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks for having me, Colin. Thrilled to be here.
Now, before we jump in, I just want to thank you for supplying us with 4 signed copies of your books. The other 2 are on the shelf behind me. And I'd like to offer them up as prizes for those students brave enough to engage us here today by asking a question or 2. As Jordan and I converse, feel free to raise your hand using the Zoom icon or paste in your question in the chat section. By doing so, you will add value to today's conversation and be entered to win one of the signed books. All right.
I like that.
Without further ado, Jordan, tell us where you went to school and what you majored in.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a long story. I went to the Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida. Go Noles. That's right. Mr. Smith over there. Yeah. So I love Florida State. I had a great time there. Entered as a political science major because I don't know, I was a weird kid. I fell in love with politics in the 8th grade and thought for the rest of my life I was going to run campaigns. My first real job was when I was 17. I was a senior in high school and I ran a countywide campaign down here in Tampa, Florida. So entered as a poli-sci major, quickly realized that that's not the practical side of how you win campaigns. And so switched over to public relations. Was a dual public relations and music major for 6 weeks until I decided that I wanted to make money and dropped music and graduated with a degree in PR.
Okay. And did you have any extracurricular activities?
Oh man, yeah. I saw that question preparing for this. I had too many extracurricular activities maybe. My big thing in college was internships, right? So the best advice I give college students right now, and I talk about this a little bit in my newest book, Master of One, is experiment, experiment, experiment. Place a bunch of little bets to figure out what you're really gifted at, because giftedness is really the secret to finding work that you love. It's really found in making others happy and serving other people really well. So yeah, so in college, I did a different internship every semester, literally every semester for all 4 years, and had some incredible experiences, very diverse experiences. I did an internship with the Chamber of Commerce. I did an internship in the Bush White House in 2006, a bunch of different stuff. And then on the side, I had a bunch of extracurricular activities as well. I played in a band that, we actually toured the state of Florida and the Southeast for a little bit, which was really fun. I played piano at a wine bar. So I did a bunch of different stuff all throughout college. I had a great time in school.
Excellent. Yeah, that's encouraging news for our students to kind of push them to get internships while they're here at the university, whether it's, over Christmas break, over summer break. But I think those are definitely valuable experiences to have. And I got to take a moment to welcome our first watch party of Conversations on Innovation. We have Dr. Dan Sturkenberg and his class watching. Excellent. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey, guys.
Come on, give him a shout out.
There.
I love it.
Excellent. And also thanks to Dr. Daryl Smith, who's usually with us, and previous guest, Mr. Dave Bates. Thank you so much. All right. Jordan, you're currently the executive chairman of Threshold 360. Can you give our listeners a brief summary of what that is and how you became involved?
Yeah, happy to. So Threshold 360, we have built the world's largest library of interior 360 images of public locations. So if you've seen 360 photography before, most likely it's in residential real estate. We saw a gap in the market about 5 years ago within public locations like restaurants, hotels, shops, attractions, and thought, how can we take really lightweight 360 cameras and just walk in and out of public locations without permission, which is a wild idea and shockingly legal, and take these pictures and create this really valuable asset. And so we did it, and we built the world's largest library of it. We got about 200 something thousand locations in 20 different countries. And the business model is that we license that content to Google and all of Google's competitors. So the individual hotel chains, tourism districts like San Francisco Travel, Visit Dallas, Visit Cincinnati is a customer of ours. I think we have a few customers in Ohio, customers all over the place. So yeah, it's a really nice business. How I got involved, it's kind of weird. So it's the first, that's not true. It's the second business I ran that I didn't start. It was essentially the entrepreneur in it. I was the second CEO. I was brought on 18 months into the business, but they had yet to go to market. So the first CEO was a brilliant technologist and really figured out what the technology stack needed to look like in order to capture this imagery at scale and in really diverse geographies. And then the board asked if I would come in and take this small team, figure out what the business model was, bring it to market. So I took it over 18 months in. I inherited a team of 12. Unfortunately, I made the decision to lay off half that team the first week because I just didn't think that was we had the right people on the bus. And we rebuilt it from about 5 people to 120 people in about 2.5 years, raised $10 million in venture capital-ish, and it had a great ride. And so I ran it for 2.5 years as CEO. I stepped down as CEO on March 1st, 2019, so almost exactly 2 years ago, and stepped into the role of executive chairman. And did that for a few reasons. Number one, going from 5 to 120 people, the business was just at a very different stage. And I'm a starter. I love going from 0 to 1. I'm not the best guy to take a business from 1 to 1.1 to 1.2. That marginal growth isn't that interesting to me. We knew we needed somebody with better managerial skills to take the business to the next level. And secondly, I had my first book called The Crate, Kyle, which you read, which your MBA students read. It came out while I was CEO. I had finished writing it like a month before I took the CEO job. The book didn't come out for another year. And when the book came out, it just exploded. It hit a couple of national bestseller lists. And so I had these 2 major things growing exponentially in tandem, which is great, but it was also problematic because I knew that I could not be truly world-class at both of them. I had to put all my eggs in one of those baskets. And so I decided to devote myself full-time to the work I've been doing for the last 2 years, which is creating content, books, podcasts, devotionals, whatever, that helps convince every Christ follower on earth that their work matters deeply to God and matters to others. So that's the work I'm doing today.
Excellent. And I love how you brought a little segue there into saying you can't do 2 things perfectly, which is really the topic of Master of One. But before we jump into that one, I want to go back to Called to Create.
Yeah.
And one of the things I enjoyed reading, which you gracefully put into perspective, is how God is truly the first entrepreneur. He created the world, and then he created us. And before he rested, he commanded us to create. And so we might say something that creating is in our DNA. So I know some of the other instructors have this problem, but what might you say to a student who claims that they don't have a creative bone in their body?
That's scripture would debunk that myth. That's what I would say. Listen, we talk a lot in the church about how God is holy, how he is omnipotent, how he is omniscient, how he is just, and he is, of course, all these things. But the first thing he wanted us to know about him is that he is creative. First thing, it's the only thing you learn about God in Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created. In the beginning, God worked. The Hebrew word in Genesis 2, I think it's Genesis 2:3, where it says God rested from his work, is the exact same word the writers of Scripture use to describe human work, right? All throughout the Old Testament. And by the way, this is unique in the history of world religions. Never before has a religion claimed that God himself worked. Every other religion said the gods worked, the gods created humankind to work and serve them. Only Christianity says, nope, God worked to serve us, to share his glory and the perfect communion that the Trinity had been experiencing for all time with us. That's radical. And it gives great dignity and meaning to the work that we do today, right? So God created, but he didn't just create, before, as you pointed out, Kyle, before the seventh day, before he took his first day of rest, he created us. And he issued an explicit job command. He said, hey, I've created you in my image, fill the earth and subdue it. Because what God created in the first 6 days is remarkable. But what's equally remarkable is what he didn't create. There's so much he didn't create. He left the earth largely empty and said, go fill it up. Go be like me. I created you creative in my image. The only thing you know about me at this point is basically that I'm creative. Go be like me, go imitate me, go fill this world with things that point to my glory, right? So to the person who says they're not creative, I do believe that God gives, this is clear all throughout the New Testament. We all have varying gifts, right? Paul made this clear over and over again. So I think some of us are more creative than others, but there's no such thing as a human who, in your words, doesn't have a creative bone in their body. Every person is made in the image of the creator God.
Good, excellent. And just a reminder, we're starting to get questions in. So if you do raise your hand, I may or may not see it. So your best option is just to paste that in chat. With that said, it looks like Stephen Venditti is asking, how would you suggest bringing creativity into what could be considered the traditional workplace?
Yeah, Stephen, that's a great question. Yeah, I think the traditional workplace where you're not the entrepreneur, you're not creating the business from scratch, there's still a lot of creativity that can add value to that business, right? You may create a new process, a new way of doing business, maybe a new product within that business. So creativity is not reserved just for entrepreneurs going from 0 to 1 and bringing a new product or a new business to market. We are all creative. Academics are creative. You're creating new programs. You're creating new material. It's all in how you frame the word creativity, right? And how we think about that word. So I love Steve Jobs' definition of creativity. Creativity is just making connections between ideas. That's all it is. It's connecting two things that hadn't been connected before together to create something new for others. I think that's a good way of thinking about it. When you think about it through that lens, you see that a lot of the work that we do in the traditional workplace is indeed creative. By the way, if you want to go really deep on this topic, I tell everybody, before you read Called to Create, go read the much better version of Called to Create that Andy Crouch wrote years ago. It's called Culture Making. He does a phenomenal job of breaking down how all work is creative because God is creative. It's a beautiful book.
All right, excellent. We got a question from Morgan. Hey, Morgan.
Hey, Morgan. I see Morgan's video.
But Morgan, before we get to your question, I'm gonna ask another one about Called to Create. The book breaks down the creation process into 3, I guess, questions. What am I passionate about? What gifts has God given me? Where do I have the greatest opportunity to love others? Is there room in that process for skills that we self-teach ourselves or learn from others, despite not necessarily having an inherent gift for it or a passion for?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll say this, I expand upon this a little bit further, well, a lot further in Master of One, the second book. I think those are 3 pretty standard questions that you hear a lot when it comes to discerning your calling in life. But I think that second question about what am I gifted at is far more important than the passion question. You guys, I promise, even though I have a lot of gray hair, I'm not that much older than you. I'm 34 years old. I think I heard a lot of the same advice about career that you guys probably heard from your teachers and from your parents and other adults in your life, which you could probably recite with me, right? Like when it comes to our career, adults in our lives told us, follow your passions, follow your dreams, do whatever makes you happy. And it's a really bad strategy for finding work that you love, primarily because it doesn't work. Like, we have data that shows it doesn't work. I would argue we have had more opportunity than any generation before us to do what we love and do whatever makes us happy. And yet Gallup, who's been tracking this for almost 100 years, tells us we're the least happy generation ever at work. And the reason is, and there's really good academic data out now to support this, passion is a side effect of mastery. It's not a leading indicator, right? So there's this researcher at Yale named Dr. Amy Wrzesniewski, who spent her entire career studying this question of what leads some people to describe their work as a calling as opposed to a job or a career. So that's a spectrum. Job on this end, career in the middle, calling is kind of this ultimate description of work. What's the delta there? She studied this with doctors, computer programmers, college administrative assistants, and the number one predictor of whether or not somebody will describe their work as a calling is not whether or not they were passionate about the work before they started it. The number one predictor is the number of years somebody has spent practicing their craft. You get to love what you do by getting really good at it, right? Which, as Christ followers, shouldn't be a total shock to us, right? Jesus came not to be served, but to serve. The passion hypothesis, if you will, focuses exclusively on which job can make me the happiest fastest. The question you should be asking is, given the way that God has wired me and gifted me, how can I make other people happy fastest? Because that's going to be the sustainable path to finding vocational joy for others and for yourself. Does that make sense, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's the gist of those questions. And I outlined them first in Call to Create and then dove a little bit deeper in Master Plan. Here's the last thing I'll say on this topic, though, Kyle. I'll say this, I think especially college students, I speak to a lot of universities. A lot of college students have been told implicitly, I don't think it's ever explicitly said, that we've almost elevated calling to this idol status in the church. This idea that there's this, it's almost the way that Hollywood treats marriage, as if there's this magical one Mr. or Mrs. Right in the world, and your job is to find that person. We all know that's ludicrous. We all know that's not how the world works. I love my wife, but in reality, there were probably hundreds, thousands of women who could have been a great spouse for me. Now, I had to choose to commit to her and say, this is the woman for the rest of my life. I think the same thing is true for our careers in a way, although we don't commit for our entire lives. There are lots of things in this world, lots of different vocations that you could do exceptionally well for the glory of God and the good of others. There's not one thing that you have to fight your whole life to find. And that's freeing, right? That means you have choice. God has a big picture mission for his church, his glory, period. You're looking for the meaning of your life, the mission of your life, that's it, that he would be glorified. And part of how we glorify him is by doing great work. So just pick, this is the work I'm going to master in this season of life for God's glory, and then go do it, and do it well, and do it joyfully, and let yourself off the hook for finding this magical unicorn of a career that's the one thing you were destined to do forever. That's my advice, for what it's worth.
Yeah, and I like to think that God is always pulling us to a position to commit to something where, he's leading us in one direction, and that's where we're going to go commit. And kind of like, even in marriage, God is pairing us up, I think, divinely. But to your point, depending on our paths, something could have changed, and there's probably other Mr. Rights, Mr. Wrongs out there. But I'm going to get to Morgan's question here because
Let's do it. I love it.
To fit this in, and I'm going to read it for the people listening. I know we could read it they could read it in chat, but Morgan asks, because I'm working full time, I struggle to find the energy and mental capacity to develop my startup idea into an MVP without the collaboration and help of others. Therefore, I understand that I may not be able to recruit others until having an MVP or at least some traction. Is it realistic to join an accelerator or find some co-founders or do I need to wait until they've seen traction? Any thoughts on moving forward?
Morgan, I feel your pain. Those are my thoughts. No, this is tough, man. This is tough. And it's a really good question, right? It's tough to be working full time and trying to get something off the ground. By the way, I don't want to assume, well, Kyle, can I assume everybody understands MVP language?
Yeah, minimum viable product.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So minimum viable product, this idea of, the minimum thing you need to test and gain traction on something. If you're curious to go deeper on this, go read The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, which is still my go-to recommendation here. Yeah, Morgan. So you're kind of in a chicken or egg scenario, right? It's a question of, do I build this MVP myself and try to get enough traction to go recruit a co-founder, or do I go recruit a co-founder to help me build a better MVP? I don't think there's a wrong choice. I think it's really based on what you have the energy and motivation to do. It sounds like you're somebody like me who loves to have collaborators, who loves to talk things out, talk ideas out. So you may need to find somebody to come alongside you just to bring the MVP to market. I don't think you need to join an accelerator to find that co-founder, though, right? I think if you're in this program, you're probably a smart guy. You could probably find somebody who's really excited about just working with you that you can collaborate with in the beginning to help bring that MVP to market. I would encourage you, though, not to overcomplicate the MVP. It's a minimum viable product. And I would encourage you to think about, by the way, Morgan, are you on mute? Yeah, you are. I'd love to talk to you if you can unmute yourself. But have you read Sprint by Jake Knapp, the Google Ventures guy?
I've not read.
I would encourage you,
work.
if you send me your physical address privately in the chat, or send it to Kyle and get it to me, I'll send you a copy of Sprint. It's a really good 5-day framework for building hypotheses, building an MVP, and getting feedback in 5 days. I know that sounds impossible, but I really believe in this framework. I've seen it work before. And I would encourage you to do that. You might not have a full 5 days to do that when you have a full-time job, but I don't know, maybe over a weekend, you can condense it into a 2-day sprint, or spread 5 days over 3 weekends or something like that. I would find a way to really condense the schedule of bringing an MVP to market, right? Like, constraints, even if they're self-inflicted in a startup, are so good for spawning creativity and for motivating you to bring something to market. That's my advice.
All right. And we have another question from Linda. If you were to have an insane project idea, how would you start going forward with it? Is there a certain process or guideline you should follow?
I love this question. I've had many insane ideas, according to my wife, who describes them as insane. Yeah, listen, I mean, as with any project, whether it's a book or a software product or whatever, start by just flushing out what this thing is, like really concretely. I find with software, with tech products, it's extremely helpful in the very, very early days to draft user stories for what this thing is, who it's going to help, how exactly it's going to work. Nothing will clarify your thinking faster than that, right? And then shop it around. I know a lot of people who are really cagey with their ideas, whether it's a book idea or an idea for a business. They don't want to share it. I had coffee with a friend of my dad's years ago at a Starbucks. And I swear, I think he thought the CIA was listening to our conversation. He was so protective of his ideas. I don't want to talk too loud about this. If you think somebody else is going to find your idea and do it better than you, you're going to lose at some point anyway, right? The best thing for your idea is to expose it to other people and have other people beat it up hard and early so that you don't waste time, right? You just sit down, have coffee with a bunch of people. Obviously right now, probably doing that virtually. And just get feedback from as many smart people as you can early on the concept. And not just advisors, but actual prospective customers. That's who matters most in the equation of bringing a new business to market. It's not people who aren't in your target market, it's your target market. So go find your customers, interview them, ask them about the problem that you're trying to solve for them, and listen really intently to what they're telling you. We don't talk nearly enough to customers. And that's what I think the Lean Startup and Sprint, that book I recommended before, are really, really good at, is baking customer feedback in really early in the process. That's important if you're doing a tech product. I found it's very important as a writer. If I finish a chapter, I'll go downstairs, like, Kara, please tell me if this is garbage, right? Or I'll send it to my assistant or a couple of members of my launch team and ask them to beat it up. It's really important to get feedback quickly. I don't know if Kyle mentioned in my bio, wherever it was sent out beforehand, but I do a podcast every week called The Call to Mastery, where we interview world-class performers who love Jesus across a bunch of different vocations: doctors, people in Hollywood, people in politics, people in business, whatever. And one of the most frequent things I hear from them about how they've mastered their craft is feedback, frequent feedback. I talk a lot about this in Master of One. It's one of the keys to mastering your craft, getting feedback quickly and frequently.
Yeah, too often I see inventors try and hold on to that secret idea because they don't want to lose any intellectual property. They don't want to lose momentum, and they'll keep that under wraps for years and not do anything with it. And then somebody comes up with it on their own, and now they're having to play catch up. Can I prosecute for this? What can I do? So I think your advice is exactly right. Just get it out of the way early and get that feedback right away. Just like Eric Ries in the Lean Startup talks about.
And it's not that it's not a risk. I'm not saying somebody stealing your idea isn't a risk, but the other risk is way greater, that your idea just won't incubate or won't develop, won't get better because you're not willing to share it with people and get feedback.
Yeah. Let's see, we have a few more questions coming in. I do want to ask a few questions about your book before, so I'm going to kind of keep going back and forth.
Yeah.
I want to hop into Master of One, and particularly I just love how this book takes the ideas of, how do I want to put it? I guess how we become masters of what we're supposed to do. And it poses the question, is a calling something you choose or something that chooses you?
Yeah.
And I guess without giving away too much of your book, how could an instructor like me or say Dr. Smith answer that question if it's posed by a student?
That's a great question. And I give away way too much of the books. I don't care. I give away the whole thing. Listen, I think we choose, right? Let me try this out. I was talking about this with my team the other day. Hopefully this will make sense. The older I get, the more I think that calling really shouldn't be a noun. It's an adjective. It's an adjective to describe what it feels like when you are doing work that you just know God has gifted you to do. Like you're doing work that you just know you're doing with such a high degree of excellence, right? That you're serving other people really well. I just don't think it's a noun. Again, I don't think God cares very much about what specific vocations you and I choose in this world. He cares about his glory. He cares about us working for the advancement of his kingdom. He cares about the advancement of the gospel. But how specifically we carry that out as entrepreneurs, as academics, whatever, I just don't think he cares. And that's a beautiful thing. I think in his great grace, he's given us freedom. Look, again, go back to the Garden of Eden. Go back to Genesis 1, 2, and 3, right? He gave Adam and Eve so much freedom. He gave them this broad mandate. It's like, hey, fill the earth and subdue it. He didn't tell them what to create. He didn't tell them what exactly to do. He said, go fill this earth. Fill this earth and subdue it. I think we have so much freedom here. And I think we self-impose constraints because and I'm speaking to myself here too, we love rules. We want to know, we want a prescription. We want to know exactly what to do because that's easier than God saying, go do anything that brings me glory, right? But I think that's it. So I think calling something we choose. Now that said, I think we should choose wisely. I think we should be deliberate. I don't think it's something we choose willy-nilly. But I think it's something that we place a lot of small bets. We figure out what's working. We figure out where we're serving other people. And then we have the freedom to just make a choice, to just go do something that brings God glory. I was reading in 1 Corinthians today. I apologize, I'm not going to remember the exact phrase. But Paul's talking about like, hey, in all of these different kinds of work, it's the same God who's working, right? He's saying all these different kinds of work that you're doing, it's the same guy's work. So he's saying two things. One, he's saying that when we work, it's actually not us working and us who can take credit for the results. It's God who works through us. You see this all throughout Scripture. Deuteronomy 8, 1 Chronicles 12, all throughout Scripture. But secondly, he's saying because it is God working through you, God's working through all people who are working, all work has dignity. All work has meaning, right? All work can be used by God to accomplish his will and his purposes in the world, right? That gives us freedom. That gives us freedom. So go test a lot of things. Figure out what you're good at. But at some point, and this is the case I make in Master of One, hopefully make strongly, at some point you do have to make a choice to say, this is the thing that vocationally I'm really going to sink my teeth into, because I believe that the pursuit of excellence is a God-given mandate, not the attainment of excellence, but the pursuit of excellence. 1 Corinthians 10:31, do all things for the glory of God, right? So at some point, I do think you got to make a choice, because we can't do a million things well at the same time vocational.
Yeah, and on that topic, when I first started the book on page 14, I was kind of smacked with that statement. You can't do it all. And anybody who's been an entrepreneur is like, wait, what? I have to do it all. But later in chapter 5, I was elated to discover that, you put that in the context. It's like, okay, you can become a jack of all trades for the purpose of experimentation and discovery, but there has to be that aha moment. And I was listening to one of your most recent podcasts with your guest, Candace Cameron Burr, and she had said something along the lines of these are all stepping stones to where you want to go. How do we reach that aha moment? Do you know when there's like, that light switch is clicks on and we're like, yes, this is what I need to be doing?
I think for some people it's a switch. I think for other people it's not. For Fred Rogers, better known as Mr. Rogers on TV, it was a switch. He saw TV for the first time. It was like, yep, that's it. I'm all in. This is my thing, right? For other people, it's much more gradual, right? But I do think there's this mandate for choice. And I want to touch on something you said before, because I want to make sure it's highlighted here. I am a jack of all trades. I have no problem being described as a jack of all trades. I have a huge problem being described as a master of none, right? That's the distinction for me. Because if I believe that work is a means of glorifying God and loving neighbor as self, there ought to be something I can point to and say, I'm trying to get world-class at that because I'm trying to serve other people really well through my work. So embrace being a jack or Jill of all trades. That's fine. I think it's the inevitable byproduct of trying a lot of different things to find what you're really good at. But once you've found what you're really good at, once you've had that aha moment, right? Go all in. Put all the eggs in that basket. Eliminate as much as you can from your professional plate so you could focus more intensely on that thing. And I think that's a continual process, right? As an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs are maybe the best case study of this. Early on in the business, you have to do everything because the thing that matters most is building a sustainable business model, and you're trying to keep costs really low. But over time, as the business grows, you do less and less and less and really focus on one or two core skills, depending on the type of entrepreneur and CEO you want to be, right? So right now, with this business of Jordan Raynor and Company, every 3 months or so, I'm shedding more and more off of my plate until eventually the only thing I'll be doing within this business is creating content, writing books, doing podcasts, doing stuff like this, that's it. But right now, I'm also hiring my team, right? I'm also involved in a lot of the marketing, right? I'm doing a lot of things, but eventually it'll get more and more focused.
Awesome. And kind of along the same lines, you quoted some statistics early in the book where it said any mastery in any field requires about 6 years of dedication. And I think there's some other statistics out there that show that the average worker changes jobs every 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are people just getting burnt out? What can we do to make sure we're mastering our craft without that fizzle?
Yeah, sure. I'll say this. I don't think you got to stay in the exact same job in order to be practicing the same craft over a period of time, right? Because you could reach a ceiling of learning in a job as a marketing manager and decide to go take another job as a marketing director, and you're still practicing the same one thing, the same craft, right? I think we're too hard on people who change jobs every 2 or 3 years. And I'm sympathetic here because that's been me for the majority of my career, right? But to your point, Malcolm Gladwell made famous the 10,000 hour rule in his book Outliers years ago. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of this. And the idea is, which was originally, the research was originally done by my alma mater, Florida State University, Dr. Anders Ericsson, that shows that it takes about roughly 10,000 hours of purposeful practice. And that is not just normal practice. We can get into that if you want, but purposeful practice to master something vocationally. So to your point, Kyle, that takes about 6 years of practice. So if you want to be a great writer, you need to spend roughly 6 years getting really, really great at that craft and purposefully practicing it, right? That's a lot of time, and more time than most of us spend practicing any one particular craft. So how do we stay disciplined? Back to your question, to answer your question, I think it goes back to what we were talking about maybe 20 minutes or so ago, right? We have to stop expecting cosmic level joy and satisfaction immediately upon taking a job, right? Because I think that's what we're being sold. We expect instant gratification in everything in our lives, and we translate that to our careers. And so when we take a job and we're 6 months in and it's not idyllic, we quit, right? We mentally check out, or we actually quit and move on to something else. And we're never able to get good enough at that craft in order to find the sustainable satisfaction of vocation, right? So that's my advice. Stick with something long enough to get really good at it.
Awesome. We'll sprinkle in some more audience questions here. Morgan's got a follow-up question. As a serial entrepreneur, how do you evaluate many startup ideas in order to determine which one to launch next?
Yeah, it's a good question. Morgan, I'll give you my email address right now. You guys all have it now. My personal email address is jordan@jordanraynor.com. Shoot me an email, remind me of this. I'll send you a spreadsheet that we use internally here, actually, to decide what products to bring to market next at Jordan Raynor and Company. And actually, I'll send you, I've done like a 25-minute teaching on this before that I'd be happy to send you. But yeah, basically it's, at the end of the day, it's boiling down what the criteria is that you're going to use to evaluate different ideas, and then just rigorously putting those ideas through that grid, right? So right now, Jordan Raynor and Company, anytime we have a new product idea, it goes into a spreadsheet. That we have, I think right now we have 3 columns of strategic value, strategic long-term value, short-term profit value, and something else. I can't remember the other thing, right? And we just grade all of those ideas based on those metrics. And we use that at Threshold, but we had an engineering team of 7-8 people, something like that. Really lightweight system, but it works. Whether you're talking about new products or new features, it doesn't have to be super complicated. Something really simple like that can keep you on the right track. And then again, get feedback from customers, prospective customers, whatever. Just be talking to people, especially customers, all the time.
Excellent. We got a question from Ben Taylor. When doing a startup company, how did you convince investors to invest in your startup? And when do you start to look for investors as you're building your company?
Hey, Ben, I love that question. So the win question's different for everybody. Although I will say, you can yourself into a weird window where I did this with a company years ago where we had the product built for the most part. We had the technology built, and then we went out to San Francisco and tried to raise money. And investors looked at us like, why do you need our money? You have the website built. Like, you can go test it tomorrow to see if there's a market for this, right? So come back when you have validation. So it's that chicken or egg thing. You either need to raise money really early, like before you've even built the thing, so that you can have the financing to build the product really well and go get validation, or go raise money after you have some initial traction and validation, right? But how did I convince investors to invest in my startups? Yeah, so I've raised money for 2 companies, and the most valuable feedback, the most valuable advice I can give you is number 1, traction and sales trumps everything, right? If you got traction, it's really easy to raise money. Number 2, the 2 most important components of a deck other than traction of a pitch are market and team. If you Google around, like, what do investors care most about? The majority of search results will tell you team, team, team. It's the founders, the founding team, whether or not they believe in you. And there's a lot of truth to that. And for years, I thought it was team, team, team. But increasingly, I actually think it's market by just a little bit. I think most investors weigh market a little bit more than team, because good investors, seasoned investors, know that even the best teams in the world are going to screw up. But if you're in a big enough market, it doesn't really matter, right? So both of my companies that we raised money for were in massive markets. Like Threshold 360, we're not in the 360 photography market. Like, I have no idea how big that market is. It can't be that big. We're in the location data market that Apple plays in, and Google plays in, and Nokia plays in, and Garmin, and all these people. That's a massive market. So a lot of it's just like positioning and framing how you talk about the market that you're sitting in. But that's my advice. If you're going to build a deck, those 3 components are the most important: traction, market, and team, in that order.
Yeah, Jordan, I like what you said about the total addressable market, because more often than not, it's not what we think it is for our product and service. And we're probably going to have to pivot at some point. So we have to be very creative in defining what those target markets are going to be. That's very important.
Totally. And a lot of this is just storytelling, guys.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not what market somebody else tells you you're in. A lot of this is what market you decide you want to be in. It's just really good storytelling of, hey, here's how we fit here. Here's how we're going to expand into this market and this market and this market. Another mistake I see a lot of entrepreneurs make is right out of the gate trying to tackle 5 markets at the same time. That's a disaster. Pick one. Pick the one with the lowest barrier to entry. Even if it's not the biggest, that's okay, right? At Threshold, we called it our beachhead market, kind of a war analogy here. You come onto the beachhead, then you can expand inward. Our beachhead market was teeny tiny. It's a group of organizations called destination marketing organizations. Visit San Francisco, visit Dallas, some of those groups I mentioned before. Very small market, very low budgets, but we crushed it in that market, gobbled up a ton of it really quickly because the barrier to entry was really, really low. And then we could go back to our investors and be like, hey, now that we have this, let's go to this market that's literally right next door of hotels that fund all these destination marketing organizations and go sell them. And that was a very credible case. It's like, oh yeah, of course. Why wouldn't they want this product, right? So it's building those markets sequentially, knowing which one's first, which is the only one that matters when you're there, but also knowing when you're building that first one, oh yeah, here's our hypothesis of market 2, 3, 4, and 5 that we can expand to once we've crushed that one. But until you've crushed that one, don't spend too much time worrying about markets 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Good. Hey, we have Mr. Dan Sturkenberg in his class have a question. From the international business class, what would you say your 3 greatest strengths and weaknesses are? What has been your journey of applying critical feedback to your weaknesses? We may need to narrow that down to 2 since we're already 3/4 of our way through our time today.
I'll narrow it down to one. So because I can only think of one strength. I can think of lots of weaknesses. Now, my greatest strength is communicating ideas, selling ideas, and I actually see a big distinction between selling ideas and selling products. Right? Like I'm really good at selling vision, and that has a lot of applications as an entrepreneur. That comes in really handy when you're selling talent to join a startup. It comes in really handy when you're selling investors, selling press, writing books now that I'm a content entrepreneur. So that's my strength. My weakness is easier to identify. I'm way too emotional. And in a startup, that's really challenging and something I've really had to manage throughout my career, because in a startup, you can have the highest high of your business ever at 10 a.m. and the lowest low of your business at 4 p.m. And both of them be equally dramatic, because every new input, because the business is so young, is so significant, right? And so my challenge is not wearing the highs too high and the lows too low. And I've learned the hard way that the only solution to that, as impractical as it may seem on the surface, is the gospel. And preaching the gospel to myself every day, reminding myself that my identity and my worth are not ultimately in my success or failure, but in who Jesus says I am as a co-heir of his, right? So that's critical for me. But the other thing that's really helped in applying some solutions to that weakness has been community. And specifically partners in business, whether they're co-founders or senior levels of my team that act as true partners in the business. I find it's really important for me to have people who are much more even keel, much more level-headed, much less emotional and more rational than me, because they can talk me down off the ledge, if you will. When I come in and be like, this is the biggest deal ever. We're going to IPO in 18 months. They're like, calm down. It's not that big of a deal. Or when something bad happens, they're like, this isn't that big of a deal either. So having that kind of emotional counterpoint on the team is really, really important for me.
And on the same vein as weaknesses, I think is in chapter 7, you address a weakness that several people admit to having, and that's saying yes to everything. How does saying yes to everything inhibit our ability to be masters in our field?
Oh, man. It's the thing that I think inhibits us from being masters of our field, especially entrepreneurs. Because entrepreneurs are so creative and see opportunity everywhere, they want to capitalize on every opportunity at the same time. It just doesn't work. You can only do one big thing at a time, as I tell people. So yeah, it's crucial. And I talk a lot more about this practically, how do we say no, in my next book, which is coming out in October, called Redeeming Your Time. It's kind of everything I think we could say on time management through a biblical lens. It's kind of a unique approach to the topic of time management. But yeah, saying no is crucial. Anyways, I'll leave it at that.
I know we're down to the last 10 minutes. I want to get to some of the student questions.
These are great questions, guys.
Linda had a great follow-up. She was talking about fear. Her fear is that her idea will be flat out rejected, or people will absolutely hate it. So how does one bounce back from something like that?
It's such a good question, Linda. Yeah, I've had those ideas, usually with my wife, that flatly rejects them. Not because she's not loving, she is, but she's the first person I test new ideas on. She would just be like, please don't share that with anybody else ever again. I was like, okay, yes. So that can be really tough, right? But if you're going to sign up to be an entrepreneur, you got to sign up for constant rejection. Like you got to be willing to be told no all the time, whether you're doing initial sales for a product or pitching investors. I've been told no way more times than I can count. And early on, Linda, that was really hard on me. I took that very personally. And again, kind of just to preach on what I was preaching on a few minutes ago, the only ultimate solution is the gospel. It's not positive self-talk. I'm so over the self-talk, self-help movement that tells you, man, it doesn't matter. Culture's answer to this question is, it doesn't matter what the investor thinks of you. It matters what you think of you, right? It doesn't matter what customers think of you. If they don't get it, that's their problem. You get it, like you keep pressing on. Yeah, that doesn't work. And I think we all know that doesn't work, right? There's a great passage, and again, apologies, I'm forgetting the exact reference, but it's the Apostle Paul, where he's writing one of these letters to the churches, and he says, you know what? I don't care what you think about me. I don't care how you judge me. And I don't care what I think of me. I care what God thinks of me. Essentially, he's saying, I'm not going to judge myself. I'm not going to let you judge myself. I'm not going to let circumstances judge myself. I'm going to find the verdict for my life in who Jesus says I am. That's the only ultimate answer, right? Is a verdict that is secure regardless of any acceptance, regardless of any rejection, regardless of any professional or personal circumstances. That's the only way to be truly courageous in work or in life, right? The most courageous people are people who have nothing to lose. And if that's true, you gotta find a verdict for your life and your work that is secure, perfectly secure, and you will never find that outside of who God says you are through Christ.
Excellent. And we're just going to ask one last question, then we're going to have to get into our prize drawing here. Morgan, I might rephrase your question a little bit, but what advice do you have on if it's best to continue to sharpen one's skills or say become a master at what they're doing at a startup or any other company versus time to actually leave that job and launch your own gig?
Yeah. Really, really good question. I don't think there's a right answer to this, Morgan. Sorry. I know you want one. I would want one too. I think this takes a lot of prayer, a lot of discernment, a lot of asking for advice from other godly people in your life, and let the Holy Spirit speak through them. But I would take solace in this. You can't make a wrong decision, I don't think. Tim Keller says, for the Christian, there's no such thing as a plan B. I think that's right. At the end of the day, the Lord's plans won't be thwarted for your life. So you can't screw up. So use your brain, make whatever decision you think is best, and move forward freely in that, right? All throughout Scripture, we see God calling people to step out into the unknown, right? He asked Abraham to leave his home, even though he had no idea where he was going, right? No idea, right? But I think that's the beauty of it. I think God wants our sanctification way more than he wants any particular result. And I think it's through that act of stepping out in faith in either direction, Morgan, that helps sanctify us, right? And makes us more like his son.
All right. Thank you, Jordan. We don't have, we have maybe one or two follow-ups, but I think some of our students might reach out to you personally.
Please do.
With some of the follow-ups. We're going to go ahead and draw. We have 4 books and we have 4 students asking questions, but I'm still going to draw as to which one they're going to receive.
There you go.
We need a little fanfare here. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go to the wheel of names where you'll see those 4 students. Can everybody see it okay? All right.
This is amazing.
We're going to draw for one of the copies, and these are signed, last I checked. Yeah, look at that. Those of you watching, that's a JR. We're going to draw for one copy, signed copy of Called to Create. Here we go. Wheel of Names. Take it away. Looks like Linda. You win. Yes, we get some fanfare here. Okay. Like all the other books I have are on the shelf behind me, but we will do a signed copy of Master of One. Now, this is my copy because it has the bookmark. You're going to have to get one of the other ones. All right, spinning again. The Wheel of Names. Morgan, looks like that's you.
Boom. There you go, Morgan.
Okay.
Thanks, Jordan.
2 more. This one's going to be for Call to Create, the second copy of Called to Create. Stephen, Copy's yours. And I don't think we need the spin for the last one. So Ben, congratulations. You get a Master of One. If you guys can just reach out to me at beyond@cedarville.edu. You can come to my office, pick it up. I can drop it off in campus mail. I think most of you are on campus. Morgan, you're not. I can mail it to you, or next time I see you, I'll drop that off. I'm going to stop my share. And that puts us at our time here. So I think it's probably a good time to close it up. Jordan, unless you want to have anything else you want to mention, tell us where to buy your book. I think it's all over Amazon, right?
It's all over Amazon. I'm easy to find. But I will say lots of free resources for you guys available at jordanraynor.com. That's here. I'll put it in the chat right here. JORDANRAYNOR.com. We get a free weekly devotional that goes out every Monday morning called The Word Before Work, which helps you connect some of the theological truths we've been talking about really practically to the work you're doing right now and in the future. We got the podcast, link to the podcast there, which if you guys are all interested in entrepreneurship, it looks like we have some phenomenal entrepreneurs who've been on the podcast. Horst Schulze, the co-founder of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Group, Chris Carneal, founder of Booster, $100 million business in Atlanta. Lots of amazing founders there, and a lot of people who are not founders. So lots of good resources for you there right now. And again, most of those are free.
Yeah, love the podcast and love the resources on your website. So I do encourage all of our viewers and students to visit your website. And viewers, if you could just give Jordan some applause using the Zoom icon, the Zoom applause icon, or thank him personally in the chat. Jordan, we really appreciate you joining us today and sharing your experiences and words of wisdom.
My pleasure.
Thank you all for tuning in, and we will have a recording available in a few days. Thank you and God bless.
Thanks, guys.